Welcome to the SwimSwam podcast. I'm your host, Coleman Hodges, and joining me today, we've got a very special guest, women's head coach at the University of Florida, Jeff Poppell. Jeff, how's it going, man?
Doing great. How you doing, Coleman? I appreciate you having me on today.
Absolutely. I'm excited to get you on. We were just talking about this earlier. I've known you for quite a while because you coached one of my former teammates, Leah Pierce, at the University of Arkansas. And I thought that'd be a good starting point. You were at the University of Arkansas, like you had mentioned earlier, 2006 to 2012. You were the head coach there. How did you end up in Arkansas, and what was that first NCAA head coach experience like for you?
No, it takes me back, and they're great memories for sure. But no, I've been at the Bowl School for 13 years. I started coaching in 1993 with Greg Troy, and then he later left in 1998 to come to Florida. Took some assistants with him, and I remained there, and obviously later became head coach. And I felt like we had accomplished pretty much everything there was to accomplish at Bowls. I mean, Greg took it to a height that you weren't going to go any further with the Bowls program than what he did. But I feel like we had a lot of success while we were there. We're high school national champions. We were top 5 at U.S. Nationals every year. And after 13 years, I just kind of had the itch to, I guess you want to say, maybe do something different. And I wasn't sure about Arkansas. It was interesting that kind of how that came about. Arkansas was looking for a new women's coach. And at the same time, the athletic director there, because they were a split athletic department, had reached out to Greg Troy and Jack Barrowley. I swam at Georgia for Jack, and then obviously had worked with Greg. And she was just searching for names, potential candidate names, and both had provided her with mine. And that's kind of how that conversation started. And it was a different challenge. I mean, at Bowls, it was always, keeping the program at the level, it had always been. But the Arkansas, position was attracting for me in a couple different reasons. Number one, it was in the SEC. So, and obviously I had swam in the SEC at Georgia. So that was of interest to me to be in that conference, obviously with those great schools. And then the other thing was, Arkansas was dead last in the SEC, at the time. If you could actually double their point total at the SEC meet, they still would have been dead last at the SEC. That's kind of where they were, at the time when I went there. So I kind of saw this as an opportunity to try to build a program from the bottom, which was completely different than my experience at Bowls. And just try to get a feel for personally and professionally, what kind of coach I really am. And again, it was, enough people always talk about Bowls and they're like, Bowls is always great because this, that, and the other boarding program, you name it. So this was an opportunity to kind of step out of the comfort zone a little bit. And first opportunity to coach collegiately, which I had never done before, but obviously had an interest in doing. So we took the leap, as a family and moved out to Arkansas. And it was a wonderful experience. We really enjoyed it.
I myself just got out to Fayetteville recently for the first time ever. It's a wonderful little town. It's super pretty out there. So when you finally got out there, that first year of college coaching, you talked about, you were at pretty much the height you can get at a club level. Talk about the transition from going from club to college and what were the hurdles you had to face that first season?
Oh man, there were a lot of hurdles. No, but all good. I can't say that I didn't anticipate them, going into it. I felt like I had a pretty good information as to what the program was like and the current situation, and obviously had a kind of goal in mind to kind of where we wanted to go. So one of the first hurdles going into, we had 14 athletes on the team, swimming and diving. So it was really small. And at the same time, like I said, not very competitive within the conference. That actually wasn't a bad thing, though, because I think, going into that dynamic with a small number of individuals, I think you have a better chance of maybe changing the culture, with the team environment. compared to if you went into a large team. At the same time, with only 14 athletes, it also provided me an opportunity to have a good amount of scholarship money to recruit with, to again try to change the dynamic of the program. So it was actually a pretty good situation. When you look at, I get the question all the time, club versus college, do you prefer one? Is one better than the other, and so forth? They're just different. I mean, I don't necessarily think, I've never looked at it as being one's better than the other. To me, when I started coaching at Bowls with Greg, he had me start with the 8-numbers, and that was kind of his mindset. Someone that wanted to get into coaching swimming for the first time, they needed to start at the grassroots, So I started with 8-unders, then 9 and 10, 11 and 12. I mean, during my 13 years there at Bowls, and then worked my way up to eventually working with 15, 18-year-olds. So I felt like I had the experience of working with every phase of development, at every age group. And to me, the way I looked at the college swimming piece, it was the next stage. It was just the next stage I'd never had exposure to, but it was still another stage of development. And so even today, I mean, after 27 years of coaching, I still kind of always feel like I have a club hat on when I'm coaching even the college athletes, because it's still about development. It really is. It's just at a different stage and a different age. So I always, I looked at it that way when I went to Arkansas, regardless of their individual backgrounds, because they were all coming from different situations, even the ones that were returning athletes. I wanted to try to put a program and even a training platform in place to help get them to the next level, which is always our goal as club coaches, is to try to get our athletes to the next group, maybe the next age group within the program, or to the next level. Maybe it's whether it's getting to sectionals or juniors or nationals, you name it, or Olympic trials. So that's kind of the mindset I had going into it. And year one, because again, we were dead last in the conference the previous year, and my expectations had nothing to do with really team goals and team performance. It was all based around individual performance. And I felt, the focus year one was trying to help kids improve and get better, because I've always felt like there's two ways to better your program. Number one is develop the athletes you have. And then number two is recruiting, recruit athletes to your program to help you get better. And those are kind of the two key pieces. So year one was also, focused quite a bit on recruiting. And I was focused quite a bit on the state of Florida, because I had those pre-existing relationships and ties with a lot of the coaches, club coaches within the state. And at the same time, because of the success we had at Bowls, it was one of the top programs in the country. I think there was some credibility there with the Florida athletes and Florida coaches from that standpoint too. So we ended up bringing in, it was one of the top recruiting classes in the country that first year. I think they were ranked in the top 10. And then we jumped up into the top 25 national rankings for the very first time that second year, that I was there. So it was a step by step. It wasn't a quick fix by any means, but that's kind of how we started out, year one. And over time we started, we were able to attract kind of a higher level of recruiting talent, to Arkansas each and every year. And at the same time, that combined with improving the athletes that we had within our program, we were able to kind of take steps, along the way. And it was great. I remember 2009, we were fifth at the SEC championship meet, which is still the highest, finish today at Arkansas. And that was huge for us. They were like I said, coming from the bottom where we were and getting that level. We had SEC champions. We had a number of individuals that went on and finaled, scored at the NCAA championships. And that hadn't been happening, in the years before. So personally, it was just really gratifying and satisfying as a coach, knowing where we started and then kind of knowing, the steps we took during those 6 years that I was there.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds super cool. 2009, you get fifth, which is the highest in program history. You'd only been there three. I think that's the third season. Yeah. And so then, you're at Arkansas for 6 years, and then you go back to club in Florida at Gulliver. And, what motivated that transition? Again, like you said, club and college, hard to compare. They're just different.
Yeah.
What motivated that change, and what was it like being back in Florida for you?
Yeah, I mean, I was prepared to stay there at Arkansas longer. I mean, we loved it. Actually, my wife and I, and my daughter, the three of us were sitting at the dinner table last night, because she's a senior in high school and
Okay.
she's going through the college process, and she just swims high school. She didn't swim year round or anything like that, so she won't swim in college. But we were going over her list of schools. University of Arkansas, and she got 14 schools. But my wife and I were talking about just how much we really loved it there. I mean, we really did. It's a wonderful place. And we probably, I mean, I don't know, hindsight, we'd probably still be there today. But what motivated the move, from Arkansas back to Florida was all family driven. I'm from Jacksonville, born and raised. My wife's from Jacksonville, born and raised. Our families, our parents are still there. We were at a time we were unfortunately had some health issues with both sets of our parents, hers as well as mine, during those last couple of years at Arkansas. And we were halfway across the country. I mean, obviously in the middle of the country in Arkansas. And we just kind of felt kind of helpless a little bit in terms of being able to provide the support we wanted to provide, to our family and be, in close proximity. So that's kind of what motivated the move back to Florida, to be honest with you. It was all family driven, had nothing to do with our experience at Arkansas. I absolutely loved it. But like I said, we want to get closer to home, and there weren't really any college opportunities available at that time. But at Gulliver Prep down in Miami, it was a similar dynamic to what I had experienced at Bowles for 13 years. It was a prestigious private school. They had just built a brand new 10-lane, 50-meter facility, state of the art, only about a year old. And they wanted to build a program, a club program, a high school program, you name it. And the opportunity that they had there was a really, really good one. I even though the program wasn't like an established program by any means, because it needed to be built, all the benefits and perks that you get, in that private school dynamic, which I was able to enjoy when I was at Bowles, Gulliver had. So both my children got to go to school there at Gulliver for free, which was nice. It was a great education, a great private school. The school even owned a house next to the school that we kind of got to live in rent free for a couple of years, which was nice too. And then we were about a 5.5 hour drive from our family, so it was doable, So it was a good enough opportunity that I accepted it and got us back to Florida, got us back closer to our family and back in the club and high school coaching again. So it was good being back in Florida. Definitely missed it. It's definitely a completely different dynamic than out in Arkansas. I kind of found myself, putting my club hat back on and high school hat back on and going back into that situation. But it was similar to Arkansas, that it was building a program again, kind of from the bottom. And so anyway, it was an exciting challenge and exciting opportunity. And again, a really enjoyable time, down in South Florida.
Yeah, I'd like to get into that a little bit more. Once you get to Gulliver, you mentioned that it's similar to Arkansas. You're rebuilding a program, obviously not as much recruiting, but you what specific things like inside the pool are you doing to those first couple of years to build that program back up? You mentioned at Arkansas, step by step, but building the culture, building the training. What specific tools? What are a few that you were using during those first couple seasons?
Yeah, I mean, not too. It's basic stuff. It's not too much different than even how we're starting this first month here at Florida. It's like the first month we go a week of every stroke, just really breaking down details with body position and kicking, and just basically advancing and progressing and adding drills from there. By the end of the week, it's full stroke swimming. Hopefully correct. That's the goal. And basically spend a week of every stroke building a foundation. And then you start training from there and conditioning your stroke from there. But that's kind of always been the way I've approached a season, if you just kind of break it down that way and simplify it. And there's no different there. I mean, I think when it comes to elite level swimming, when you go to a national level meet or Olympic trials or something like that, or even an NC2A meet, you really can see consistent things done correctly with the elite level athletes and the best ones. So I don't think there's a whole lot of secrets, as it relates to what it takes and what's necessary, to be successful in the sport. Yeah, there's varying degrees of talent, obviously with every athlete and skill sets. But at the same time, you put all that aside, I think it comes back to being able to swim efficiently, in all four strokes. And a lot of that, it's technique, so, that was kind of the big focus going in there. Cause I felt like, hey, I mean, even volume wise, in a normal training situation, when I went to Gulliver, I took everything that I kind of had done before at Bowles and I scaled it back probably 75%, 50 to 75%, if you're talking about training, volume, intensity, you name it. And there's a big emphasis on technique, even more so. It was probably skewed that way more so than the training focus and volume focus. Because I was like, I knew where they were and I knew where we wanted to go. And I just kind of tried to find a place in the middle as a starting point. And so that's kind of what I did year one. And it was good. And then the next year, because it was a lot of the same individuals, I just tried to take a step further, with the volume and the training intensity, and eventually trying to get to a place that maybe was similar to what I did at Bowles, in the club and high school environment there. And I think that just comes back to knowing your team, knowing your athletes and kind of knowing where they're at and just being realistic, I guess, in terms of your expectations and what you think they can handle in year one. And then, and it's like anything, once they're able to kind of master that and gain confidence with it, then you can try to progress from there, So not too unlike, I think, even when you have an athlete come to the college level and they're here for 4 years, year one is a transition year for so many of them. So you're kind of approaching it still the same way. And then each year you try to take another step and you try to advance a little further to spark that, continual improvement over a 4-year period. So that's kind of the way I approached it, there at Gulliver.
Yeah. It sounds like you have a strong emphasis on 4 strokes technique. Do you have a favorite or a favorite event to coach or a favorite event that you like watching? It sounds like the 400 IM might be it.
Oh, without a doubt. Definitely the 400 IM, for sure. It's there. Again, I started my coaching career with Greg Troy at Bowles and always a very strong individual medley focus. And there should be in the club dynamic, it should be. It should be about teaching all 4 strokes and developing all 4 strokes and trying to develop the most well-rounded, swimmer that you can. So again, probably dating back to when I started coaching and where I started it and who I started it with, individual medley has always just been number one in my mind as it relates to, my favorite events, favorite thing to develop. And that dynamic, if it's individual medley, you're developing all 4 strokes, and to me, that's I enjoy doing that. It's a lot of fun, and because there's every stroke is different, and from a technical standpoint, each individual has different things that you look for to try to improve. So I think the IM is the most challenging for sure. I think of the strokes to develop.
Yeah, I certainly believe in that philosophy personally, and as a coach as well. But tell me a little bit more about why you believe that. If many club swimmers, many college swimmers, many swimmers generally, might be of the mindset of I only need to be able to swim the 50 and the 100 freestyle, or the 100 butterfly, or the 100 breaststroke. Why do you think it's important for swimmers to really be well-rounded in all 4 strokes?
Yeah, there's a number of different reasons. I mean, for me, you can look at it two perspectives. If you're looking at it from a coaching perspective, I've always kind of felt like if you want to have a successful team, whether it be at the club level or even at the college level, I've always felt like the more versatility within your program and the more versatile your athletes are, I think you have more opportunities to score points, at an SEC meet or an NC2A championship. Even from again, if we're approaching it from the college standpoint, from one year to the next, events change. I mean, one year, the 200 fly could be like a really strong event, at the conference level or at NC2As. The next year, it could be the weakest event, depending on who graduates, a given year and who comes in. So when you have athletes that are versatile and can go in different ways, different directions, different, you have different options as a coach, I feel like you kind of have a stronger team, because you can do more different things. But if they're more one-dimensional, they can only go one stroke or one distance, you're kind of handcuffed, in terms of what you can do. And then the other thing is really just from the individual athlete standpoint. I mean, you see it as a club coach. You don't see it as much college-wise, but sometimes strokes change, strengths and weaknesses change, So, I mean, I know there's athletes that maybe when they were younger, they're a breaststroker, but then, when they hit 15, 16, body change, so forth, maybe they're no longer a breaststroker, they're a butterflyer, a freestyler. So, but if you try to specialize too young and too early, and you never really got that exposure to the other strokes, then you'll never, ever be able to experience that transition to another event or to that another stroke because you never were introduced to it to begin with. So I feel like if you kind of have that foundation well-rounded in all four strokes, it gives you options if you need them, as you progress, even injury, I hate to say it, but someone at the collegiate level gets injured, somehow. I mean, maybe that prevents them from doing a stroke they've always done. And, they still want to be able to add to the team and be productive to the team. And you want them that way, obviously, as a coach. So if they kind of have that well-rounded background, that may allow you to go into a different event or a different stroke that otherwise they would not be able to do if they didn't have that well-rounded, background behind them. So those are just kind of, like I said, I think there's a lot of different reasons why you would like to develop well-rounded swimmers, but those are kind of, different reasons, both from an individual standpoint as well as from a team dynamic standpoint in terms of building a strong team.
Like I said, personally, makes sense to me. I love that philosophy. I think it's a good way to go, especially when you're working with 8-year-olds or, the younger side of swimming. So you're at Gulliver for 4 seasons and then you make the transition to college coaching again. Take me through that process and what was it like? Because this was your first time coaching at the collegiate level on a men's and women's combined team.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely was. And I wasn't expecting to leave Gulliver. I really wasn't. I wasn't looking to leave Gulliver. I got a phone call from Greg Troy, and he called me from the women's NC2A meet. It was in 2016. So that was, the end of my 4th year at Gulliver. We were, like I said, we loved where we were in South Florida. Both my kids were loving school down there at Gulliver. And within our club, we were doing some great things. And I wasn't looking to leave. So this was kind of a surprise. But Greg called me up and he said, hey, how'd you like to come to Florida and help me rebuild the women's program? I go, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, I'm at the NC2A meet right now. We just finished 19th, which isn't quite, Florida standards and kind of where we've been in the past. But to add to that, all their scores at the NC2A meet were all seniors and graduating. So there were no returning point scores coming in the next year, and there were 17 incoming freshmen, including two of my athletes from Gulliver that were part of the women's team that were coming in. And Martin Wilby was a longtime associate head coach here. Always leaned a little bit more to the women's side. He was getting out of college coaching. Now, Martin's one of my close friends. I actually just talked to him yesterday when we were walking the dog. But and we all coached together at Bowles, Martin and Greg and myself. So we all had that strong relationship. But Martin was getting out of college coaching. So it had nothing, it had nothing to do with anything other than that. Martin was getting out. So Greg had an opening and something that he wanted to fill. And at that time in the combined dynamic, Florida's men's team was competing at a really high level. Caleb was here at the time, top 3 at NC2As. But the women weren't there. The women were 7th, I think, at the SEC meet that year or the year before. And because all the returning scorers from NC2As were all graduated, it really was rebuilding from the bottom again on the women's side of the program at Florida. So he asked me, how would you like to come to Florida? So, I came in, I interviewed, I met with Jeremy Foley, who was the athletic director at the time, who was phenomenal. And still wasn't sure whether or not I wanted to do it or not. But when we started putting everything down on paper and weighing out pros and cons of whether we're staying at Gulliver or coming here, we felt it was definitely the opportunity to get back into college coaching. Definitely an opportunity, to your point, to be in a combined gender college program, which I'd never experienced before because at Arkansas it was just women. It's only an hour and a half from Jacksonville, so it was even closer to our family. My wife and I. It's an hour and a half drive. It's easy. And we love North Florida. I mean, like I said, that's where we were born and raised and kind of grew up. And like I said, it also got me reconnected with Greg Troy. I mean, Greg, arguably you look back over his career, he's one of the most successful coaches ever, in the sport of swimming. So to have the opportunity to come here and work with him and learn from him, continue to learn from him. Because I always did when I was at Bowles. I mean, every year I feel like I picked something different up from him. And that was all club. I really hadn't had the opportunity to learn from him in the college dynamic. So I felt like those were all, great reasons, to take the leap. It was a little different because I've been a head coach the previous 15 years. So it was a little weird going into an assistant role, but if there's anybody I'd do it with or do it for, it'd be Greg, without a doubt. So that's kind of what led me, to the University of Florida in 2016.
And again, that first season, like you said, no returning point scores, 17 incoming freshmen. What do you learn that season? How are you approaching that differently than maybe Arkansas or Gulliver? Because that's kind of a different. Again, you are rebuilding, but it's a little bit of a different situation again.
Yeah, rebuilding for sure. And I get it. I mean, there wasn't much influence that I could really provide either in year one. I mean, as an assistant, I mean, Greg's the head coach, and obviously, my role, my responsibility as the assistant is to support Greg, and obviously as head coach of the program. I had the exposure to both sides, men and women, and the way that Greg coaches, in our team dynamic, and again, we have between 80, 90 athletes because both of our teams, men and women, programs. So 80, 90 athletes combined. So in every day, I mean, Greg, he's brilliant from this standpoint because I could never do this, but he always felt like this is what true coaching is and was. I mean, every day, I mean, he's like, hey, you, I want you to go there. You. And he didn't necessarily have this written down either. I mean, he just that can say, hey, I want you to go here this day, you go there, you name it. And then even from a coaching standpoint, he's like, Jeff, I want you to take the breaststrokers today. Anthony, take the distance freestylers. Steve, take the flyers. You name it. Every day it changed. So I was with a different group every day. The athletes were constantly rotating through groups. Again, my mind was just like kind of scrambled because that's just not how I operate. But to him, I mean, he knew he had a plan. So it's not like, he didn't know what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing. To me, it was brilliant, but to me, I just knew I couldn't do that. but year one for me, I was learning a lot. I really wasn't directing anything, and I wasn't able to really provide influence other than with the relationships with the women. That to me, I saw as my big role was to make sure that, because Greg had a whole program and 80, 90 athletes, men and women, that he had to be responsible for directing. So I just wanted to make sure within the women's program that I obviously had a real good pulse with each individual. And then I could relay that to Greg, you know what I mean, in terms of communication with him. And then recruiting was big. So, Greg, I know, was at a point where, I was doing most of the women's recruiting. Anthony was doing the men's recruiting along with Steve. And then Greg would kind of get involved on the tail end of the recruiting process when it came down to kind of sealing the deal and get him here or doing the scholarship pieces at the end. But a lot of my responsibility was recruiting, as well. So that was kind of it. So it's completely different than at Arkansas when I was head coach. There was a lot more on my plate there and a lot more that I had responsibility for as head coach that I didn't have, responsibility for my first couple of years here at Florida. So.
Yeah. And, I mean, it seems like you guys did an all right job. Those first couple of years, you got NC2A, you got NC2A scores, but back, I think it took a little bit, but you got there. That's
year one we did that. That was the year that was written on SwimSwam. that 0 points at the NC2A meet. The amazing thing about that is it wasn't too unlike year one at Arkansas. And that year one, we were focused a lot on the individual improvement. There's no doubt. I mean, with 17 incoming freshmen, no returning point scorers, year one was focused on trying to get our individuals to a different level. and kind of taking a step there. And we did that. That was the amazing thing. As much as people, talked about that, my first year here, we didn't score any points with our women's team at NC2A. It's the first time ever. And it's horrible. Not what you want to be reading in the news. But at the same time, if you looked at the individual strides that our athletes took that year, I mean, it was pretty amazing. We were pleased, from that standpoint. But it didn't show in our team results. We were still 7th at the SEC meet. And like I said, at NC2As, we were very competitive. And even my second year here, 7th at the SEC meet. And really, we scored points at the NC2A meet the second year, but it wasn't a whole lot. So we still felt like we weren't making the strides that we wanted to make those first couple of years. So.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because it is an important part of that history. And like you said, when you give it context of, well, we have no returning scorers, we have 17 incoming freshmen, obviously it's not where you want to be as a team, but individually you made strides, and it put, obviously those first 2 seasons, I think, put you in a pretty good place to take over once Troy retired. You end up taking over the women's team as their head coach, and we're down to 6 minutes, so that's a great place to end, I think. Tell me about these past couple seasons as the head coach for the women's team, and what that transition was like for you.
No, they've been great, and you're right. You hit it on the head. Those first 2 years did set a platform for these last 2 years, without a doubt. And I don't think we would have been able to accomplish what we've accomplished the last 2 years without those first 2 years and kind of what we went through there. So recruiting, big piece. We brought in a real strong recruiting class that were freshmen my first year in that position, so that helped a ton. And it was interesting. Again, we knew we kind of had been down for a couple of years, and we had a combination of freshmen that were coming in that, some were on the national junior team, national team, wanted to make some big impacts here at the University of Florida, which was exciting for them. But then we also had a combination of sophomores, juniors, and seniors that weren't happy with where the program was, and they were extremely motivated to change it, And so that combination was really powerful. And we swam really where it all really started taking off for us. It's one meet, dual meet against Georgia. We swam Georgia and a dual meet at Georgia, our women, and we beat them. And it was the first time I think we had beaten Georgia at Georgia in 25 years as a women's program. And it was a huge, huge confidence booster. And that's what we needed. We needed confidence, as a program. And it felt like after that meet, and it was a really tight meet. It was really close, came down to the last relay, you name it. But it felt like that was the confidence boost we needed to kind of start moving forward. And we did. So we just kept building off of that throughout the course of the season. We went to the SEC meet, and we finished second. So we've been 7th the previous 3 years, and we finished second to Texas A&M, who won their 4th championship in a row.
And you at that meet, you gave them a run. I think that's worth noting that, it might not have ended up close, but I think heading into that meet and the first couple of days, everyone was kind of like, hold on a second. Can Florida actually win this? And you didn't, but I think it was kind of up in the air for maybe a couple days.
Yeah, we were in it on the beginning of it. Ran out a little steam there at the end, but no, it was great. I mean, we our freshmen were huge at that meet, but also our returners. I mean, we had Vanessa Pearl was 403, 400 IM. She broke Elizabeth Beisel's school record in the 2 IM at 153 and did that as a freshman. And she also broke our school record in the 200 breaststroke. But I think all 3 swims were the fastest in the country for a freshman. I don't think there was a faster freshman nationally. And then Leah Bradwell, who was one of our freshman distance freestylers, went 436 in the 500 free. She won the mile in 15:53. We actually went first and second in that. She won it. And then Taylor Alt, who was one of our sophomores, was second. And those 2 times were the fastest times in the country for a freshman as well, for Leah. And then our returners were great. Sheridan Dressel, Kelly Fertel, those guys. And it was awesome. And now I will be honest, we focused on the SEC meet. We knew we needed to take a step as a program. And we just felt like that was the realistic step, We went to NC2As, a month later. Our returners were able to re-rest and be just as good, if not faster. Our freshmen struggled with the re-rest and re-taper. Most of them had never done that before. But that was year 1. And then year 2, this past year, we just built on it because we had a lot of the athletes return. And, I think we were ranked number one in the country for a couple months in the fall in the dual meet season, which was great. Sheridan Dressel was tearing it up and doing well. We finished second again at the SEC meet. This time it was even closer. It was 28 points, and it came down to us in Tennessee. Tennessee obviously won. But this year was a little different that we did have some athletes who were trying to focus a little more on NC2As because we felt like that was the next step. We were great at SECs year one, but not as good. We moved up at NC2As, but it still wasn't where we should have been. So this year, we obviously wanted to have the same success at SECs, if not win. That was our goal. But then we needed to be better at NC2As. And our relays were fantastic last year. It was a huge, huge step for our program. And we felt like that was going to be the needed step or addition we needed to be able to make a step at NC2As. So that's kind of what the last 2 years have been like. But they've been fun, a lot different than my first 2 years here. But it's been a lot of fun. We've really enjoyed it. Yeah, for sure.
So we're down to 60 seconds. Take us through the next couple months for you, with quarantine, with all the uncertainty. What are you guys focusing on just for the rest of 2020?
Well, that's a good question because so much is still up in the air and uncertainty. I mean, we're, whether it be the regular season dual meet, as the SEC's made a decision, we can come back and start doing dual meets October 1st. Well, the other conferences aren't necessarily in that situation. I think, ACC's November 1st, Big Ten, I don't think is going to start competing until January 1st is what I've heard from friends of mine that coach in that conference. So it presents challenges for us putting a regular season schedule together. And at the same time, we still don't really know what our SEC meet's going to look like because we know it's going to be different because we're one of the few combined conference meets. So there's no way we can be combined this year in this COVID environment because of social distancing. So all that's still in the air. So I don't really know what that's going to look like, but we're working hard to figure it out because I really think number one concern for me right now is just our athletes' mental state more than anything else. And I think the sooner we can get something established and down on paper, I think it's going to be much better for them to be able to kind of focus in on getting back to training at the level we need to train at, and also have that motivation that we need to have to move forward again. I mean, that's the goal. We want to move forward again. So that's what we're focused on right now.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on and talking with me today for a while. You've been listening to the SwimSwam podcast. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. You can take SwimSwam podcast on the go by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Look for links in the description below, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos as well.